evolution of the werewolf movie. If you love movies, feel free to check out my radio page. Details are all below, all the links and everything. You could even give my Facebook page a like if you're really, really nice. That would be so sweet of you to do so. So without further ado, let's start. Now, the werewolf is a widespread concept in European folklore, existing in many variants which are related by a common development of a Christian interpretation of underlying European folklore developed during the medieval period. But that's enough of that, let's talk movies. The Werewolf, 1913. Now, is it werewolf or werewolf? I'm not too sure, but we're going to say werewolf from now on. The Werewolf, 1913, was the furthest back I could actually go. It was a silent short film that is considered the first werewolf film and the earliest film of the Universal Monsters series. Directed by Henry McRae, it was released by Universal Studios, of course. Now, it took 11 years for another werewolf movie to come out. In 1924's The Wolfman, American silent drama film that starred John Gilbert and Norma Shearer. Next year we had Wolfblood, A Tale of the Forest in 1925. Another silent film starring George Chesebro, who also directed it. Almost another 10 years later we got The Case of the Howling Dog in 1934, Werewolf of London 1935, while in Tibet researching a mysterious flower that purportedly takes its strength from the moon. Botanist Wilfred Glendon, Henry Hull, is bitten by a strange creature back in London. Glendon becomes absorbed in his research of the plant and is annoyed by the appearance of fellow scientist Dr. Yogami, who reveals that the plant is the only known temporary antidote for werewolves. This film has a transformation scene, and we all know how important they are when we're talking about werewolves. Now, you never thought I'd be talking about Bela Lugosi in a werewolf video, but yes, he's featured a lot in my recent videos. This is because, you know, he's a legend and he pops up everywhere. He plays the son, Bela, weirdly enough, in The Wolfman, 1941. George Wagner is the director who's known for this, but also The Fighting Kentuckian with John Wayne. I know a bit of a leap from werewolf to John Wayne, but it happened. Claude Rains is in it too. The Claude Rains from Casablanca, Lawrence of Arabia, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and Hitchcock's Notorious. We had two more werewolfian movies. I think I've just made up a new word with werewolfian, but with The Undying Monster in 1942, a horror and a mystery film, also known as The Hammond Mystery, featuring a werewolf as the primary antagonist. The Mad Monster in 1942, a mad scientist changes his simple-minded handyman into a werewolf. A year later, we had Frankenstein Meets Wolfman in 1943. Does exactly what it says on the tin. A crossover monster movie featuring Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman and Bela Lugosi as Frankenstein's monster. My brain really hurt when I said those words, Bela Lugosi as Frankenstein's monster. It just doesn't seem right, does it? My brain couldn't take it. Speaking of monster crossovers, we had House of Frankenstein 1944, which we talked about in our last video, along with The Return of the Vampire 1944. It was a big year for The Wolf, 1944. I mean, I had those two just mentioned, but we also had Cry of the Werewolf in 1944, also called Daughter of the Werewolf. Young woman raised by gypsies is actually the daughter of a werewolf. She starts killing those who know about her. Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, again the same year. As we know, they've dabbled with the Wolfman. House of Dracula, 1945. Frankenstein's monster was Glenn Strange. Dracula, played by John Carradine. Wolfman is, of course, Lon Chaney Jr. Another woman werewolf movie arrived in the form of She-Wolf of London, 1946. In the USA, the film was released as a double feature with The Cat Creeps. It was also included on the Wolfman Legacy Collection DVD set. 10 years later, so on the dot, again, The Werewolf, 1956. If you're playing the drinking game, every time I say werewolf, you drink, you're going to be absolutely shit-faced. Again, The Werewolf, 1956. A low-budget American science fiction horror film which offered a science fiction view of a traditional supernatural creature. Duncan Marsh, a mild-mannered man, finds himself lost in a remote village called Mountain Crest. His mind is clouded, but he learns later that two scientists injected him with a special serum containing irradiated wolf's blood when he was suffering from amnesia after being in a car accident. The wolf's blood, for unknown reasons, changed the previously gentlemanly Duncan into a vicious, bloodthirsty werewolf. Next year, I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Not me personally, but the movie. I wish it was actually a teenage werewolf. That was released in 1957. A hypnotherapist uses a temperamental teenager as a guinea pig for a serum which transforms him into a vicious werewolf. The same year we had Blood of Dracula, 1957. How to Make a Monster, 1958, which title alone will always make me sing Rob Zombie's song of the same name in my head. The movie was a double feature with Teenage Caveman and a follow-up to both I Was a Teenage Werewolf and I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. How to Make a Monster was filmed in black and white, with only the last reel filmed in colour. Speaking of more monsters, we had The Man and the Monster, 1958, and The Castle of the Monsters, 1958. The 1960s arrived with the one and only Oliver Reed, the first ever role apparently as well, playing the werewolf in The Curse of the Werewolf, 1961, and it was a British film based on the novel The Werewolf of Paris by Guy Endore. The film was made by the British film studio Hammer Film Productions, which we all should know. Werewolf in a girl's dormitory. Authorities scramble to locate the phantom behind a series of grisly murders at a detention school for girls. A few years later, Face of the Screaming Werewolf, 1964, by, now I've never heard this before, by an occasional filmmaker, Jerry Warren. It says he's an occasional filmmaker. Jerry Warren. Mad. Things get more hot under the collar with Orgy of the Dead. Yep, Orgy of the Dead. Ed Wood directs this charming film. The 60s were sex mad, I tell you. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors and The She-Wolf, both released in 1965. Another woman-led werewolf movie. Speaking of sex mad, we had the next Carry On Screaming, 1966. From the Carry On franchise, of course. The 12th in the series, and I personally think it's the best out of the Carry Ons. Kenneth Williams, Jim Dale, Fenella Fielding, Harry H. Corbett, John Pertwee. The list is endless of these stars in this national treasure. Mad Monster Party, 1967, the American stop-motion animated musical comedy film. Spanish horror cinema brings us Nights of the Werewolf. And we also had Frankenstein's Bloody Terror in 1968. The latter film had other hell's creatures like Dracula and the werewolf. Not just Frankenstein. Now, we entered the 1970s with The Beast of the Yellow Night, a Filipino-American horror film. After making a pact with the devil, a man transforms into a killer capable of absorbing evil from his victims. It was Eddie Romero's baby. He was director, screenwriter and producer, which I always appreciate. They do the whole thing. Werewolves on Wheels. Werewolves on Wheels, 1971. Don't laugh, it's serious. An American exploitation film that blends two genres, the outlaw biker film and the traditional horror movie, which is always interesting. It's not. I always thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a comedy, but I don't think it is. The Werewolf versus Vampire Woman was next. The Spanish horror movie starring Paul Naschy. The fifth in a series about the werewolf Valdemar Daninsky. Next year, more werewolf movies kept on coming. It kept on coming. Moon of the Wolf, a gothic TV movie. The Fury of Wolfman, 1972. Another Spaniard entry here. Werewolf of Washington. Now here's a topical one. Werewolf of Washington, 1973. A horror comedy film. The nation's capital faces a bizarre political scandal when a top presidential aide suffers a severe personality change. Very fitting. The Boy Who Cried Wolf was next on the agenda in 1973. Count Dracula's great love with the one and only Elvira, which would make you think of Simpsons with boobs. You gotta love Elvira. The Beast Must Die with Michael Gambon, Peter Cushing, Calvin Lockhart and Charles Gray, the Charles Gray from the James Bond franchise. Same year, Scream of the Wolf, 1974, the TV movie. We had Legend of the Werewolf, 1975, another Peter Cushing-led movie. On the trail of a fiend who kills during the full moon, a police officer is led to a French zoo and its keeper. The Rats Are Coming, The Werewolves Are Here arrived. The cult classic directed by Andy Milligan. The Werewolf of Woodstock. For any of you Woodstock lovers out there, this is a movie for you. The Werewolf of Woodstock, 1975. Werewolf Woman, 1976. A woman has dreams that she is a werewolf. So she goes out and finds men. She proceeds to have sex with them and then rip their throats out with her teeth. Yeah, we've all had that. We've all had that problem, haven't we? Wolfman, 1979. A man finds out that his family has a werewolf curse put upon them. Director Worth Keeter. And at this point of the video, I want to ask for you to personally comment on the video and tell me if I've forgotten any werewolf movies, your favourites, or ones that you recall. Do comment below and tell me what ones I've missed out, and tell me how silly I am for missing out your werewolf movie. The 1980s, 1981 specifically, you could say was the year of the wolf. Wolf. An American Werewolf in London landed 1981. A horror masterpiece by the one and only John Landis. David and Jack, two American college students, are backpacking through Britain when a large wolf attacks them. David survives with a bite, but Jack is brutally killed. As David heals in hospital, he's plagued by violent nightmares of his mutilated friend, who warns David that he's becoming a werewolf. When David discovers the horrible truth, he contemplates committing suicide, but before the next full moon causes him to transform from man to murderous beast. All-star cast. We even have a cheeky cameo from the late and great wonderful Rick Mayall. This is the werewolf movie everyone talks about. Everyone thinks this is the champion. There's a reason why. It's the best. You know, its special effects is spellbinding. The transformation scene still holds up today. The story, the acting, the characters, just simply the best. Well, there were werewolf movies released the same year of An American Werewolf in London. I know, poor buggers. Called Wolfen, the same year, Wolfen, and Return of the Wolfman again. Another one that stuck out was The Howling, which started in 1981. We had Howling 2, Your Sister's a Werewolf, Howling 3, Howling 4, The Original Nightmare, Howling 5, The Rebirth in 1989, Howling 6, The Freaks, Howling New Moon Rising in 1995, even The Howling Reborn in 2011. A massive franchise to sink your teeth into. A massive cult following attached to these movies as well. Again, another one, A Full Moon High, released the same year. 1981 is the year of the wolf. Full Moon High was a horror comedy. You know, we had The Monster Club, starring John Carradine, Vincent Price and Roger Sloman. Next year, after 81, we had 82, with The Beast Within. And it was outshone by a music video. I know it sounds silly, but it was. The best music video still to this day, Michael Jackson's Thriller, which had a sneaky voiceover by Vincent Price, the man, the myth, the legend, Vincent Price. Directed by John Landis, of course, who we previously mentioned in our American Werewolf in London. Ozzy Osbourne turned into a werewolf in his music video a year after Bark at the Moon. You know, that was released in 1983 when he appeared as a werewolf. The Company of Wolves, and that's just another one, released 1984. The Company of Wolves is a 1984 British gothic fantasy horror film directed by Neil Jordan and starring Sarah Patterson, Angela Lansbury, Stephen Ree and David Warner. The story was written by Angela Carter in her The Bloody Chamber book, a collection of phenomenal dark fairy tales, which I urge you to check out if you haven't done so. If you're any type of horror fan or you're an avid reader, do check out The Bloody Chamber. There are some really dark stories in there, so be warned. Like, we're talking dark, so just be warned. Monster Dog. A year later, we had another contender with Silver Bullet. 1985, a horror film based on the Stephen King novella Cycle of the Werewolf. Yeah, I get another one with a huge following. I was recommended to watch this about 10 years ago. Crazy. I enjoyed it thoroughly as well. Another personal favourite of mine was released the same year Silver Bullet was. I'll give you a clue. Michael J. Fox. Basketball. The Beach Boys. Of course, Teen Wolf, my second favourite werewolf movie. Loved the scenes of the basketball and he's playing basketball as the wolf and otherwise. I love the soundtrack. I love everything about the movie. It's the perfect time to tell you this. I can say this because, you know, it's a video about werewolves, so it's topical. So, but why didn't Michael J. Fox go for the brunette in Teen Wolf? Why didn't Michael J. Fox go for her? You know, I've had a crush on her ever since I watched the movie for the first time, and she's far better and better looking than the blondie character. I always thought that, and I'm sitting there watching the movie like, Why are you chasing the blonde girl? You need to go for the brunette. The brunette always wins. Am I the only one who thinks this? I think I am. But, mad. Teen Wolf beat other wolf movies with a lot of street cred, like Lady Hawk and Transylvania 6-5000 the same year, 1985. In Transylvania 6/5000 with Jeff Goldblum in it. It also beat to the punch The Midnight Hour. Teen Wolf, of course, has got a new audience and a new following through its new TV series, which I'm not too sure if it's got another series, but it does exist. The Monster Squad, 1987, was a horror comedy film written by Shane Black. It has a mass following. Teen Wolf 2, tried, 1987. The Curse of the Queer Wolf in 1988. Is it rude? Is it offensive? I don't know, but it sounds really, really offensive. Waxwork, 1988. And we must not forget Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. Animated movie, of course. My Mom's a Werewolf, 1989. Night Shadow. I think Night Shadow is based on a comic book as well. The 1990s happened. We had Mad at the Moon. That's Mad at the Moon. A Wild West beauty. Mary Stuart Masterson marries her lover's half-brother, whose moon sickness turns him into a werewolf. Western meets horror here. Full Eclipse, 1993. Another Anthony Hickox movie. He did Waxwork, previously mentioned, of course. He did Hellraiser 3 and Warlock. So he has some horror street cred. Wolf, 1994, led by Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer. A publisher, Will Randall, becomes a werewolf and has to fight to keep his job. Also, there's a bit of romance in there as well. Project Metal Beast, 1995, and Monster Mash, 1995. Not that Monster Mash you're thinking of. It was a horror-themed musical film based on Bobby Boris's classic song, Monster Mash, and the 1967 stage musical as well. Bad Moon, 1996, which had decent special effects. We also had Werewolf, 1996, and An American Werewolf in Paris, released 1997. I remember this as being a loose sequel to the best werewolf flick ever conceived. The Creeps, 1997. A mad scientist animates Dracula, Frankenstein, and other movie monsters, but they're only 3 feet tall. The Wolves of Cromer and The Werewolf Reborn were released 1998. Cumberlania. We had a hard hitter in the form of Ginger Snaps. Ginger Snaps. My third favourite werewolf movie. If you have to tie me down and say I've got to pick my top 3. The same year, another animated movie, Vampire Hunter, The Bloodlust. But we have to talk about Ginger Snaps. First in the trilogy. It had a kind of cult following, which makes it even more interesting, really. But it's one of the best werewolf movies. The chemistry of the two sisters, the backstory, the awesome scenes they have together. Again, the special effects, the blood. It's just so fascinating. I love the story, and we all can relate to it as well. There's a lot of subtext to the film and what they mean. And of all the films, this is the one I'd try and get you to watch. If you had to push one film, it would be the trilogy Ginger Snaps. Wolf Girl, 2001, which sounds like a DeviantArt account. Yeah, Ginger Snaps. I like how it's also a bit underground as well. It's not too mainstream and not too, everyone's not seen it, so it kind of makes it a little extra special. The next one in 2002 has such a formidable backing and following. It's Dog Soldiers. Some people's favourite werewolf movie. In fact, I've met people who put this as their favourite. British movie starring Sean Pertwee. We have Kevin McKidd, Liam Cunningham. Dog Soldiers is directed by Neil Marshall, known for The Descent, a kick-ass film. We have to talk about the Underworld franchise too. It's long and lengthy in its history, but with relation to werewolves, it has to be mentioned. Along with Dark Wolf, 2003. And there's 2 sequels to Ginger Snaps. Ginger Snap 2, Unleashed, and Ginger Snaps Back, the beginning. We go back to their roots in, again, 2004. Released the same year, which I find extraordinary that 2 films of the series Ginger Snaps can be released in the same year. I still want to be proven wrong by that, because I don't think any movie director can make 2 sequels of the same movie in the same year. I don't think it's ever been done before. Comment on if you know of any films that they've been 2 films made the same year. This is the first one I've came across. 2004 was notorious for having Van Helsing as well, of course. And I want to play a clip of Van Helsing as well, because last time I mentioned Van Helsing I didn't, so I wanted to do that. Wild Country, also 2004, along with Roman Santa. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban had a sneaky werewolf cameo along with Blade Trinity. Cursed, 2005, the legend Wes Craven directs Cursed, written by Kevin Williamson, known for Scream and obviously collaborating with Wes Craven on the Scream movies. When I had an old YouTube account, long gone now, Kevin Williamson actually watched one of my videos and actually posted it on his, I think it was like his MySpace back then, but yeah, it was quite interesting. Bless him. Now, as for the film Cursed, it stars Christina Ricci and Jesse Eisenberg, and you don't think you put them 2 together, but yeah. Another animated one here with Hoodwinked in 2005. Obviously has the stereotypical wolf in the fairy tale in this one. The Beast of Bray Road. Mexican Werewolf in Texas, which sounds hilarious. Mexican Werewolf in Texas. The worst horror movie ever made in 2005. No, that's actually the name of the movie. It's not my personal opinion. The worst horror movie ever made, that's what it's called. Big Bad Wolf 2006. Skinwalkers 2006. And Blood and Chocolate 2007. An Erotic Werewolf in London. I'm going to say it again. An Erotic Werewolf in London 2007. Cheeky. Skinwalkers and Blood and Chocolate being the most popular out of the bunch here. Never Cry Wolf in 2008, which I think I've seen, I'm not too sure. Curse of the Wolf. Werewolves in 2009. And we'll mention Twilight again, with specifically Twilight New Moon, which has more of a interest in werewolves, which is loved by an awful lot of people. Just not me, but it's loved by a lot of people. 2010, right off the bat, we had The Wolfman in 2010. And they tried to go for an old classic and remake it and reimagine it with Emily Blunt, Anthony Hopkins, Hugo Weaving. So it had the stars, it did have the stars, did have the backing, did have the budget. 3 out of 5 on IMDb, 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, or Tomatoes if you're American. Metascore of 43. But who cares? Who cares about all the numbers and the statistics? I don't think anyone cares. Red Riding Hood, 2011, obviously has a wolf in it, of course. Werewolf, The Beast Among Us in 2012. Hotel Transylvania, the same year. Big animated movie with a splendor of monsters. Wolf Children in 2012, a Japanese animated fantasy film. Where, 2013, in France, an American female attorney defends a murder suspect who has a brutish appearance and a deadly secret. Can you guess what the deadly secret is? I can. Mole Instruments' City of Bones, 2013, a recent favourite of people. Canadian-German action-adventure science fantasy film based on the first book of Mole Instruments series. The only cast I can pick from this is Robert Sheehan, who is notorious for being in Misfits. He was superb in Misfits, very, very funny. Lena Headey, I know from being in Game of Thrones and Parole Officer, Lena Headey. And Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, who I know has been Henry VIII. But they all feature in the film The Mortal Instruments, City of Bones. I'm sure there's a lot more actors you probably know personally or know of. Now, 2014, Wolf Cop, which sounds hilarious. And, well, it is a comedy, so it's you're kind of glad it is, because it does sound hilarious. Yeah, Wolf Cop kind of makes me think of Werewolf on Wheels, which sounds hilarious, but that wasn't a comedy. Wolf Cop sounds funny as well, and that's actually a comedy. Late Faces in 2014, the most recent werewolf movies I can pluck out from this time period. I've obviously missed out films from 2015 and 2016, because I honestly can't think of any werewolf movies which have been released this year or last year. So if you have got any in your mind, do tell me. Now, the future of werewolf movies. Now, big news came about with An American Werewolf in London remake, which scared a lot of people. This is why I made the video, really, because of how important this is. John Landis obviously directed An American Werewolf in London, and his son, Max Landis, wants to recreate it, which is, I don't think that's another new thing to my knowledge. And Max Landis is attached. I am a fan of Max Landis. I do follow him on Twitter, and I do watch his stints on movie fights. I do think he's a really interesting guy. Edge of Empire, savage wolf-like creatures which roam the lowlands. In the Shadow of the Moon, 2019, Lycanthropist. Shiver, Benighted, Dances with Werewolves, Full Moon Fever, and The Ghoulie Boys are all expected to come on our screens. Please comment if you have any videos you want to see, evolution of videos. I'd love for you to make a little note down at the bottom and tell me which ones you want to come up, what you want and you want to see in the future. You know, what I've got planned are I want to do evolution of the Alfred Hitchcock movie. I want to do evolution of the Godzilla movies, and I'd love some influence from you guys. But I just want to thank you for watching. Thank you so much. And if you do like what I'm saying, you enjoy what I do check out my radio shows. You can hear my voice with music as well. I'll leave you the link in the description. I do movie specials on Wednesdays and Thursdays, so it'd be wonderful if you could check me out and like my page on Facebook. Thanks again so much.